And a good afternoon and a good morning to some and a good evening to others. Welcome to the latest in the Io-Tahoe series of webinars. I'm Steve Friedberg. If you look at your screen, I'm the guy on the bottom. And joining me on this webinar is the fellow whose picture is up on the top, Tom Smith. Tom is a research analyst for DZone and DZone.com. Tom, howdy. How are you?
Terrific, Steve. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate your being here. What I want to do before we get started is have folks tell the folks rather about who you are and what you do, etc. And tell us a little bit about DZone and DZone.
Okay. I'm a reformed marketing executive. I joined DZone about 4 years ago to help them with their marketing, and they liked the way I interviewed people so much that I've been interviewing IT executives for the last 4 years and really enjoying getting to know all the different folks in the different companies and being able to follow what's going on in the rapidly changing world of IT. DZone is a website, DZone.com, and the D stands for developer, and we cover about 15 different zones of IT, with big data and AI and ML being two of those zones. Also, the heritage of the company, it started as Java Lobby, and so Java is one of our zones, as is DevOps, security. Check out DZone.com. You can see the 15. We had a strategic investment by SFW Capital Partners back in October, and they have rebranded the holding company DZone. And so DZone is now the owner of DZone.com and our software partner, AnswerHub.com, or AnswerHub. And that's a collaboration software that companies like SAP, Microsoft, and LinkedIn are using to help their developers collaborate and be more efficient. So that's a little background on me and DZone and DZone.
So you have made it a point over the last several years of talking with these IT executives, also with developers, and that plays directly into what we're going into today, because this is a little bit of a right turn for us. Usually we're talking a lot more about business value of things like data catalogs, smart data discovery, and the like. Today we're going to focus a little bit more about what the developers are looking for and some insight that may help them become better at what they do, not only in this area, but in terms of their career as well. Quick logistics for today's webinar. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, we'd like to hear them. Please enter them in the box over to the side of the screen. And as you note here, we are recording this webinar. So, Tom, anything you say can and will be used, well, never mind that, but it is available at io-tahoe.com/webinars. And the slides that you're about to see will be available from that site as well. And if you have any comments along the way, we'd be delighted to see them up on Twitter. You can submit your questions to Io-Tahoe using the hashtags AI, ML, and data discovery. A couple of the things that Tom and I have been talking about leading up to this, and I think we're going to discuss them pretty in depth here, at least I hope so. What are the biggest challenges for developers? What do they need to know in today's environment, and where do they see things headed over the next, 36 months, the next 3 years? And how do big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning factor into those challenges? I think what, Tom, what you're going to be saying may surprise some folks as well. We're also going to be talking about what developers need to know about smart data discovery and data catalog. One thing that has been getting a lot of publicity, to nobody's surprise, are privacy regulations like GDPR, EPR, the Consumer Protection Act over in California, and a lot more. So the question then becomes, how do privacy regulations like GDPR affect the work of developers? And if we go far beyond the technology point of view, we get into a much more basic question. and that's something, Tom, I know you're pretty passionate about. What strategic roles can developers play, should developers play at their companies? So with that overview in mind, let's start digging in. Tom, as we talked about beforehand, there is plenty to stress over if you're a developer these days. Am I right?
There is, but I don't think there's as much for a developer to stress over today as there was 2, 3, 4 years ago.
In what respect? And why?
What I'm hearing from the interviews I'm doing is that the AI and ML is getting baked into the tools that are being offered by the public cloud providers, by the software providers. Salesforce is using AI and ML to do smart CRM and sales enablement. I know ERP companies are baking AI and ML into their business processes. Coding or programming platforms are building in AI and ML into their coding platforms to make it easier for developers to code. And so these tools weren't available 3 and 4 years ago, and I think the developers are in a unique position, and they don't need to learn as many AI and ML skills as we may have thought 3 or 4 years ago. And they've got a tremendous perspective on how to use data because they've been using data as they've been building applications all along.
So if you are a developer and your boss comes to you and says, hey, we really need to develop a artificial intelligence capability here, or we really need to start implementing machine learning in our place, it may not send the chills down his or her back as much as it previously may have done. Is that correct?
I hope not. And what they need to do is, before they get too nervous, is see what's out there, especially with their ERP system. Their ERP system may already have some AI and ML built in that the developer will know how to access that a business owner may not have experience with.
So they may have the tools already at their disposal, and ultimately what I'm hearing you say is that the learning curve for developers may be a lot less steep than it would have been, as you said, 3 or 4 years ago.
Absolutely, and the developers are going to learn very quickly that because of the way they think, what they've been doing over the course of their career, they're a lot better prepared to work with the more robust tools that are being provided by the cloud providers, software companies, and so forth, than a business owner is. So that puts the developer in a unique position.
It's not just working with the tools, though. Am I correct? I mean, it's the one thing that may be a little bit different, may be requiring a change of mindset.
On whose part?
On the part of the developer.
Yes. And that mindset is, am I going to continue in my role as a developer, writing code and developing applications, or am I going to try to get up 5,000, 10,000 feet and start looking at the business problems that my company's facing and become more of a business leader from the IT perspective? Because there are so many ways that IT and drilling on down, AI and ML can help improve business processes and save companies money. That a developer really has the opportunity to add significantly more value to their organization.
What I'm hearing you say is, and it's the last bullet point on this slide, is developers have an opportunity, even a responsibility, to think more strategically just beyond the lines of code. But the devil's advocate in me says, we've heard this before. We've heard this before. What's changed? What's making it more for want of a better term, an imperative now? What's making it more possible now than before?
Every company worth its salt is a software company. Whether you're an auto dealership or a hospital or a bank, software is going to drive where you go in the future and what kind of user experience and customer experience you're able to provide. So all of a sudden, the developers aren't in the background anymore. They're at the forefront of providing a better user experience and customer experience.
So what we're saying is obviously that the opportunities will arise if you're willing to assume them. The developers that you're speaking with, go ahead.
But you also mentioned it in this final bullet, developers have some responsibilities as well, because developers are uniquely aware of the importance of secure data, of what you can potentially do with data. And it is incumbent upon them as a member of an organization to emphasize the importance of security. And if they don't want to get involved with it from a business standpoint, to at least let the business owners understand what they can potentially do with all of the data that they're collecting, or that they're not collecting now, but they should be. Does that make sense?
It makes excellent sense, especially when you consider, and you and I talked about this before, the flood of data, if you will, the tsunami of data that is, with everything now a sensor, everything an IoT device virtually. I mean, we're seeing, as you said here, data drives applications, whether it's from an autonomous car, which the big question is, it's generating data left and right. Which data do we actually use, or whether it's an overseas flight, and how many petabytes are generated by the plane. So it's important, I think you would agree, that knowing what data to use, where to find that data, is going to be a key driver, correct?
As well as seeing the potential of what can be done with data. We know with autonomous cars, with airlines, we've heard stories, but so many of these, so much of the potential are kind of under the covers. It's business operations. And one of my favorite examples is what's being done with IoT devices on tractors at the corporate farms, where they're collecting data on the richness of...
I'm sorry, you were saying the richness of what? And folks, I think we've just lost Tom. Stand by 1 second, and we are now recording again. And thanks to everybody who stuck with us while the internet gods were not cooperating with us, or the telephony gods, or something like that.
Or maybe they didn't like us talking about AI and ML.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. As a matter of fact, now is as good as any time to do it. You were talking about the developers and their use of AI, ML, I believe, and how it could be an advantage for them to really be more strategic in their approach. Am I correct?
Yes. I really believe that developers, because of what they've come up through learning how to program and develop applications, and all of these applications are driven by data in one form or another. It may not have been big data, but it was using data. So developers are uniquely qualified to understand the potential of AI and ML.
And that's especially true if you take a look in the verticals, the key verticals where trying to utilize this advanced technology would be of benefit. areas such as healthcare, financial services, and retail. Fraud detection is just the tip of the iceberg, is it not?
It is the tip of the iceberg, but pretty consistently, as I've done interviews in this space for the last 3, coming up on 4 years, financial services, healthcare, and retail are consistently the most progressive in terms of pursuing AI and ML. And what drove it was fraud detection. First in financial services, then in healthcare, and now in retail. And then it's just exploding from there to, again, provide a better user experience and customer experience, as exemplified by Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, companies like that.
And obviously, whenever I go to Amazon and I try to click on something, it'll say, oh, people like you who bought product A would also like product B, C, and D as well. So the recommendation engine is in full throttle there. But we're seeing an expansion in that area, things like Netflix and Spotify as well as other companies, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm attending a search conference that's driven by AI, and I'm looking forward to seeing how AI is improving search.
Now, are we talking primarily B2B here, or are we talking B2C? I mean, you see the thing up on the screen where it says making life simpler and easier. When you and I talked about it before, we're saying if you don't do it, your competitors will, obviously.
Yep.
But where are we seeing the predominance? Is it a consumer-based or business-based?
I would say predominant. That's hard to say because I talked to a sample, but I don't know if it's a representative sample. The sexy use cases are in B2C. Everybody can relate to Amazon, Netflix, and Spotify, and Pandora, and all these other things. The money's being made in B2B, and the money's going to be made in B2B, because what can potentially be done for a company to reduce overhead by 0.5% by improving their business processes that's driven by AI and ML, that's putting a ton of money on the bottom line. And I can't even quantify what it is. But I would say there is 10x more money to be made in B2B than there is in B2C.
10 times as much? Wow.
Easily. When you consider a company like Ford Motor Company improving the efficiency of a production line, I don't know how many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that saves. And go ahead and extend that into Amazon's warehouses and into every other industrial application.
That's incredible. As you said, the Amazons of the world, the Spotifys may get all the headlines, but what I hear you say is that quietly operating in the background, you've got the Ford Motor Companies of the world and the others who are saying, that's nice, we can save and make a heck of a lot more money, and we don't have to trumpet our successes. We're just doing it using artificial intelligence.
If Ford, GM, John Deere are able to save 2 cents on every dollar they spend on operations, I can't imagine how much money that adds up to, but it is significant.
Wow. So let's take it one step further. Having the ability to do this analysis, to employ and to deploy artificial intelligence is great, but as you said, it's all based on the data. Data is the fuel that drives the apps.
Data is the new oil.
Well, absolutely. And it is data discovery, specifically smart data discovery, that may drive and provide that oil for things like AI and ML. Am I correct?
Yes.
Because now let's go back to this overwhelming amount of data that companies have. How are they going to manage it from a developer's point of view, from a manager's point of view? Well,
you referenced, let's first talk about big data that we know we've got. And business owners and developers are going to come up with hypotheses that they can probe using artificial intelligence and machine learning to either prove or disprove a point. Where the real neat opportunities are is with the dark data, as you've got down here, because you throw a machine learning model into that dark data, and it starts finding associations that no one even conceived of, that something in column A is correlating with something in column triple X. And no one could even conceive of that, but now that you bring it to the fore, now that machine learning brings it to the fore, it's like, whoa, that makes total sense. And it can drive cost savings over here. So that's the huge potential here, is we don't know what we don't know.
Have you seen any numbers, any indications of how much data we don't know about? I mean, are we talking 10% of the data that a company has, 40%, 95%? Because we all know the data that we want to hit. Oh, this is the obvious data. But to get to the point that you were just talking about, do we have any indication of how much data like that there is out there in terms of a percentage?
I have not heard anyone discuss it, and I have not seen anything from the consultancies, or the research companies. So there's nothing that I can refer to, but
I've got to believe it's got to be immense, based on what you've said and based on what others have said. And you mentioned the example, the case study, if you will, Watson in healthcare. Now, granted, Watson has gotten its share of negative publicity, but you said that there's some incredible things that it has succeeded in, right?
Well, one of my favorite studies, Steve, is the use case where there was a lady in Japan with a very rare form of cancer, and they had 8 of the world's leading oncologists trying to come up with the best treatment for her. And they fed her symptoms into Watson, and Watson came up with a different treatment than was recommended by the 8 leading oncologists, and Watson's treatment was the best and helped cure the woman.
So what's the lesson there?
A lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, I've trained in this my whole life. I'm an expert in this area. Fine, you are, but you can't know everything, and you ought to rely on machines and computers to help you digest vast amounts of information that you cannot, and help inform your decision.
Wow. So from a developer's point of view, if that developer knows that I have a powerful tool like artificial intelligence and or machine learning and smart data discovery to help me find those unknown insights, how can they best work with it?
Think about the possibilities based on what they've learned over the course of their career, whether they've been in, whether they just graduated or whether they've been writing code for 20 years or 5 years. Think of the potential applications and the potential possibilities based on what they've done. And don't just focus on writing code. Focus on what are the opportunities for your company, your organization, to change how the game is being played, the way Lyft and Uber disrupted the transportation business.
So again, think more like be more than just a coder, as you have here. And we bring back that example of if you could reduce the overhead in your company by even 0.5%, think of all the money that could be saved there.
Yes, developers are uniquely qualified to look at their business and say, this has been driving me nuts. And what if we improved our business process? What if we relooked at our business process? Let me look at automating it and see what it can do. And fine, you don't want to get into the leadership of your company, but you do want to improve the quality of your life. You want to improve the quality of your colleagues' lives. You want to help your company make more money. You're uniquely qualified to do that today, more so than many other people in the company.
But if a developer does have a management path in mind, if he or she does want to make it up to the C level, what I'm hearing you say is that this could be a way for them to prove their worth to the company from far more than just a tactical point of view.
I wouldn't say it could be a way. I would say it is the way.
Very good. We go from the smart data discovery into the data catalogs. Now, you've got all this discovery, you've got all this data, huge amounts of data just sitting there, and you're finding out about it, but it needs to be stored, and it needs to be stored effectively so that it can be accessed again and again. And one of the things that we've noted...
And accessed efficiently, because I know from the interviews I've done that 80% of a data scientist's time, a data analyst's time, or if you've got a developer doing this work, 80% of their time is spent attempting to get the data in some sort of order so that it can be properly analyzed.
Precisely, and that's what we refer to as a waste of time. Obviously,
Yep.
if you can automate the process, if you can have the machine basically querying the data and sorting it out, and not just the data but also the metadata, then the remaining 20% can be done by humans who can look at the data that where one company's or the AI engine may have said, this is a pencil, this is a pencil, this is a pencil, and you, the human, go back and say, the first two, you're absolutely right. The third one, no, that's actually a tomato, and that's fine. But you make the changes there.
That's part of helping the model learn.
Exactly. So, which is where AI and ML come into place. So you can spend that time analyzing the data versus cleaning and preparing it. And you're getting it, I guess as you talk to your developers, you're getting a sense of frustration out there that, darn it, I should be doing more than just trying to normalize the data?
Oh, frustration from developers. My sense is the developers get it a lot more than the data scientists and the data analysts, because the developers have been dealing with this their whole lives. And the data analysts, data scientists are coming out of grad school with their degrees, and they just want to run numbers. And the data they're seeing isn't ready to be run. If you can use AI and ML to improve data quality so that an analyst, a scientist, a developer can get right into the data, you've just increased their productivity 5x, because previously they were wasting 80% of their time.
You just brought up a real good point. I'd like to go into that a little bit. On one hand, you have your developers. On the other hand, you may have your data scientists, the people who are doing the deep analytics. How much crossover should there be, as opposed to how much crossover is there currently?
There's not as much crossover as there needs to be. There really ought to be something called data DevOps, where the data team is involved with the development and operations, but that's a ways from happening. And with the changes that we talked about earlier, Steve, with the solutions, the cloud services, the software as a service, ERP systems and things like that, offering AI and ML as a more robust offering, what is happening is companies don't need the data scientist or the data analyst, because the software companies, the cloud providers are doing that work for you, and they are making the data more accessible by business owners and by developers. And there's a reason that they've done that, is because it's very hard to find a data scientist or a data analyst. They typically are sucked up by Google, Facebook, Apple, name the top 10 companies out in Silicon Valley. They're the ones buying up all of the data scientists and data analysts, so that other companies, even Fortune 500 companies, can't find them, can't keep them. And so the software providers, the solution providers are like, we need to give our clients access to AI and ML tools. And so that's what they're doing. And that's why the developer's job has become so much easier over the last year or two.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the FANG companies. What is it? Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Yeah. And you can throw Spotify and Airbnb and other companies in there, but you get the gist.
Something I saw a couple of years ago, and what little analysis I have inside of me, I predicted the data scientists are going for 150, 200,000 a year,
Yep.
and companies were saying we don't necessarily want to pay that much for that capability. Can't we automate what they do? And based on what you've said, it sounds like the tools that are out there, especially the ERP tools, are starting to incorporate it, making the need for these people at mid-sized firms even a little bit less than it may have been otherwise.
Right. And a mid-sized firm couldn't even afford someone like this if they could even convince them to join their company. So that's really what the software providers, cloud providers are doing, is they're meeting the needs of their customers.
Absolutely. But things are going to continue to change, obviously. So the slide that's up there right now, we're talking about voice-based search. The Next Web quoted a major analyst firm as saying that 30% of all browsing sessions are going to be voice conducted, and Forbes is saying that half of all searches are going to be voice. What does that do? Where does that take things, and how does it make the developer's life easier and or more difficult?
Because companies like all of the home speaker providers, like Amazon and Google Home, they're giving developers open APIs so that they can access the technology used in these things and start to integrate them into the applications they're building. And I've heard that 30% of searches are already being done by voice right now. And while I don't have a Alexa at home, I do use Google Voice Search because Google understands me better than Siri does. And it's just easier to do. And that's what this is about, making it simpler and easier for people.
But simpler and easier for the people, at the same time, is it going to be simpler, easier, or more difficult for their developers to adapt?
I think the developers love anything that makes it easier to integrate features into the applications they're building. And the cloud providers are providing these and providing APIs through which they can integrate these applications.
So where do you think we're going to be in a couple of years? I mean, we've got the analysts saying 30%, 50%. Are they on target? Are they being optimistic, or are they underestimating the market? What do you think? Well,
if you've got 30% of voice searches already being done, or 30% of searches already being done by voice today, I'm very comfortable that 50% of all searches would be done by voice in 2020, and that 99% of all searches will be done by voice by 2025.
Wow. That's going to be incredible when you think about it.
It's just the way we're going. And part of what the Next Web is saying is that we're not going to be using our phones to search by 2020. We're going to be using these other devices like Alexa. I can't even envision what that's going to be. Our smartwatches, we're going to be talking to our smartwatches about what to search. Don't know.
It'll be Dick Tracy all over again, I think. Now, take it one step further. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're exactly right. And I get a little leery of predicting what things are going to be, because one of the things I've observed in doing my series of interviews on an annual basis, it's incredible how much all of these technologies change in just 12 months. So to hypothesize about what something's going to be in 3 or 5 years, my brain doesn't work that way.
So when I go back to one of the first slides when we said, here's our agenda, where are things going over the next 36 months? What I'm hearing you say is, dude, you can't think that far in advance. Think the here and now, because tomorrow the here and now may have dramatically changed.
On many fronts, that is true. And that's why it is critical for developers to stay open-minded, stay fluid and agile in the technologies they're using, Don't chase shiny objects, but at the same time, if there's something out there that it looks like it's going to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish, download a trial and try it and see if it's going to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish.
The challenge, of course, is going to be how do you, the developer, or really anybody for that matter, determine what's the shiny object and what is the stuff that's really going to make the difference. That's the challenge, I think.
It is.
And it's, we've seen too many cases where the next great thing has proven to be just another shiny object.
And that's why you don't want to become too enamored with those shiny objects. They may work for your needs now. Think about, and it may work for the application you're building out right now, but think about, is it going to scale? Will it handle 100,000 people? Will it handle 10 million people? And that's just something you're going to have to play with and be prepared that maybe when you get up to 100,000 people on Black Friday, that it's not going to handle that, and you need to be considering some other alternatives. But it's cool that you got it to 100,000. Now where do you go next?
So it becomes a question of do what you do now and do it well, but always be ready for the next best thing, even if it means turning around and kind of revamping your approach. And that's true just about any part of business.
Or re-architecting, yes.
Yeah. So then there's the question, and this is the wild card in all of this. The business people are talking about GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that's in place in the European Union communities. Now, Tom, as you and I discussed, we did a previous webinar here with Pam Baker, a reporter, who said that GDPR has in fact become a global standard. That the big companies that have presence over in the EU are saying that there's no reason, or we really cannot afford to have a separate financial architecture here in the States. Let's just go all GDPR. We're seeing that a lot.
Right.
At the core of GDPR and EPR and the Consumer Protection Act in California and a lot more, as well as things like HIPAA, et cetera, are security and privacy. You're arguing, I think, that, as it says here, it's everybody's responsibility, not only the business owner, but the developer as well.
And the developer's on the forefront. And I interview a lot of IT folks, and the stories I hear about the number of apps that we have on our phones and just in business that with vulnerabilities in them is appalling. And still, the two most frequent problems are the top two in the OWASP top 10, cross-eyed scripting and SQL injection. It's like, these are basics that we've got to be on the lookout. And I hear a lot that developers are still under pressure to develop apps as quickly as possible and get them out. But anybody who's putting out apps that are not secure, that have a vulnerability in them, they're putting their organization at risk. And I think it's important for developers to let the business owners know, I understand your desire to have this app out. However, if we put an app out there that causes our consumers to lose for us to lose our consumer data, or for our consumers to get compromised, we could be running the business into the ground. So it's very irresponsible. Go ahead.
Nobody wants to end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for all those reasons.
Absolutely.
And you've said, and when we talked about it beforehand, that as security as part of the user experience and the customer experience should be table stakes. A different way that I heard it expressed was, if you're building a house, it's the nicest house in the block, but unless you have a good foundation, it's going to come crashing down. Same thing with security. That security needs to be the foundation of everything that you do in technology, and probably no more so than it is now. So something you just said a couple of seconds ago is the developer needs to be able to offer some pushback to the business owner to say, I can't get this out in the time frame you want because from a security point of view, it's not ready. It's not where it needs to be. Are we seeing any signs? Are you talking with people who say, yes, businesses are starting to listen to that, or is it still, oh, we'll worry about that in the next rev?
I observed a shift over the course of 2018 as I was doing interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Once the Equifax hack was made public and got so much attention, I think a lot of C-level executives and a lot of boards have said, wait a minute, we want to know what the security practices are. We cannot risk losing consumer data or losing our company data. So we are now putting security at the forefront as opposed to making it an afterthought.
And that's a huge change.
But I'm just hearing it qualitatively. That's
a huge change, and that's a good thing. So even if you assume that artificial intelligence has been baked into some other apps as well, developers still really can and perhaps should be using those tools, those capabilities to do the smart data discovery that we've previously referenced to meet, as it is there on the screen, the frantic demands of managers.
Absolutely.
What are you seeing when you talk to the analysts? When you talk to the developers, are they buying into that? Are their bosses buying into that as well?
And that's a great big, it depends. More so than they were a year ago. And I think companies are putting more emphasis on security now. I heard a story about Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. They've got signs up everywhere reminding all of their employees of the importance of protecting customer data and being sensitive about transferring data files and things like that. So if Hewlett-Packard can do it, everybody can do it.
Or at least everybody should do it. Now, whether
everybody should do it, period.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no financial institution worth their salt is gonna risk this, because they'll be shut down. Same thing with healthcare, and that's why financial services, healthcare, and retail are the leaders in adopting technology, pursuing fraud, making sure consumer data is secure, is kept private. They're under a lot of pressure to perform.
So let's bring this up out of the weeds a little bit. We started off talking about developers. We have referenced developers and their needs and their abilities and their opportunities throughout this entire hour. You have suggested several times, and we'll bring it up again, that a developer has the opportunity to be more strategic if he or she wants that opportunity.
Correct. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep coding and developing applications to help your business, or do you feel like you can take on even broader business responsibilities and help the business achieve some of its financial goals, its efficiency goals, help the company run smarter? You can do whatever you want to do. But what I said earlier, based on your position in the company, what you've done over the course of your career, you have exposure and knowledge to a lot more things like security of data, like the potential of what you can do with data. And so even if you don't want to have a more strategic role, it's incumbent on you to share your knowledge of what the possibilities are with regards to leveraging data and what the responsibilities are with regards to keeping that data secure and private.
And the good news is that you do have more tools at your disposal than you did 12 months ago. So if you look forward 12 months, let alone the 36 months or whatever, you know that you can deploy AI and ML with smart data discovery and data cataloging to help you get a better handle on the data, that you can make more informed decisions and develop the better applications that are going to help the company get ahead.
Absolutely. And you, more than any business owner, in your organization are positioned to understand what the potential is, and you can go back to your vendors and find out what's on their product roadmap with regards to AI and ML. And if it's not there, consider changing vendors, because the future of your career and the future of your organization depend on it.
So with that in mind, let's start wrapping things up. You said right off the top, and said, in fact, you've said it several times during this hour, developers have the incredible opportunity to be more than just the coders. But how it relates to the biggest business challenges today, that's where they play the key role, correct?
Partnering with the business owner to help them appreciate what the potential is, leveraging their knowledge of applications and data.
And if you can use artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, whether they are standalone tools or baked into existing applications, they can help you address those problems, get insights that you may not have even thought of asking about to a greater degree than ever before, correct?
Right. What I'm envisioning is when a developer sits down with, let's say, a marketing business leader and starts talking to them about the potential, what can possibly be done with the data, the marketer is just like, whoa, I hadn't even thought of that. And so all of a sudden, the developer's a hero.
And we can all use more heroes, for which smart data discovery is a key element in that. If the tool is AI and ML, then the data discovery, the ability to find those linkages between column A and column X, that's the vital part to helping companies understand. Based on what you've seen and based on the people you've talked with, you had indicated that if companies don't deploy this kind of capability, they risk falling behind and risk losing business, etc. What percentage of companies that you've talked to get it? And which percentage of companies are starting to become more aware that, yeah, this is something I have to do? If you look at the bell curve, we're not talking Luddites, but we're talking about, we're clearly in the mainstream here.
Every Fortune 500 company gets it. Probably every Fortune 1000 company gets it. But are they going to be able to make the transformation they need to make? Look at what Airbnb has done to disrupt Hilton and Marriott. Look at what Lyft and Uber have done to render taxi medallions to be worth less than 1/10 of what they were worth 5 years ago. Companies have got, legacy enterprises have got to be thinking and acting in a more agile manner, or green grass startups are going to totally disrupt their world and be providing a better user experience, a better customer experience at a better price, and totally upsetting many other apple carts, many other industries.
And it is the developers that you've said who have a unique opportunity to help drive this. If the business people aren't thinking about it, they need to be. If the business people are thinking about it, the developers can say, how can I help you, or have you thought about this, or something of the sort that drives it even further.
Exactly.
And on that note, folks, if you have any comments, any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. You can go on Twitter using the hashtags AI, ML, and Data Discovery to Io-Tahoe. Tom Smith, I really want to thank you. You have been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time. And
I appreciate you having me, and I hope all the developers that get to hear this are fired up about their potential, their career potential, and their potential to contribute to their organization. And if their current organization won't listen to them, others will.
And Tom, if somebody wants to check out your work, where should they go?
they can find me on DZone.com. I've got over 1,000 articles on there, and I keep writing.
Indeed. Tom, thanks very much. Everybody, really appreciate your time. And so for Io-Tahoe, I'm Steve Friedberg. I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.